This first story is about the electric shoes. Just when you thought normal shoes
Or ample.
were, electric shoes. These are going to help you walk 2.5 times faster. They're called moonwalkers. And it's a silly story, and it seems like a silly item, but I like talking about it.
Is there video of them walking? Because I don't see any video.
No, I haven't seen any video, but the idea is that you just walk at a normal pace. You walk in your normal gait, and then there's wheels on the bottom that help you just go faster. So you walk at your normal pace, but it actually propels you at about a jogging pace.
Oh.
With these electric. Yeah.
I think I would pull something.
No, you just walk at a normal pace. You can do that without pulling something, can't you?
No, not necessarily. I have to warm up.
Yeah.
So walking at a normal pace, and you're, I have to see video of this, Brian.
Yeah. I mean, there's wheels on the bottom, but it's not like a rollerblade. They're flat, and they've got batteries, and they just, it's got intelligent motors in it and stuff that, again, you just walk at a normal pace, and when your wheels hit the ground, they just, propel you forward.
Hello, fellow pedestrians. You know that feeling when you're at the airport and you step onto a moving sidewalk? You're still walking, but suddenly the world is floating by so much faster, and you have all this extra effortless speed.
This is from Wired.
Behind these,
I pulled up a YouTube video, and I'm hoping to
put an electric moving sidewalk under each of your shoes.
Oh.
They promise to increase your walking speed by 200.
It doesn't look as stupid as I thought it would. It kind of looks like you're moonwalking and forward. You're just kind of walking and you're sliding.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah. And they're called moonwalkers. It's a company called Shift Robotics. It started at Carnegie Mellon University, and it started as a Kickstarter a while ago, but they're now at the point where they're just selling them on their website. So this is a real product that you can buy. I mean, it's niche, but the reason I like talking about it is because, we'd like to say we're in the early innings of all this. And this is the kind of stuff that's made possible with the electric revolution. Lithium-ion batteries and electric motors are going to transform the world. And there's going to be all kinds of products that we never thought of. And this is kind of one of those products. So it's expensive, $1,400 US for a pair of these things. And the range is about 10 kilometers or 6 miles.
All right.
So you're not going to go a huge distance because the batteries can only be so big, because these strap onto the bottom of your regular shoes and they just kind of make your shoes thicker. But I don't know. I think it's when electric bikes, when we first started talking about electric bikes on the show, the first thing that people often say when they hear an electric bike is like, oh, well, you don't get any exercise that way. Like, doesn't that defeat the purpose of having a bike? But you and I know, no, it helps you ride more often. It helps you ride further, and you still get exercise with an electric bike. Well, this is the same kind of thing. You could just walk to places that you wouldn't normally walk to. Like, this could take me downtown, and it would normally take me an hour to walk downtown. So I never do that because it's too far. It takes too long. But this would be about 20 minutes. So, if I wanted to, I could walk downtown.
Well, they should send us a pair to try out. I would worry about getting down your front stairs without, literally killing yourself.
Yeah, and of course, the deep freeze here has already begun. So there's already snow and ice on the road. So, we'd have to wait. Wait for the, the electric ski version or something. But, it's sure, I would absolutely love to try these.
Well, you're a man of means. Why don't you pick up a pair and just sort of circumnavigate the globe or something? And
yeah.
It's a bit pricey for shoes that move you. You'd feel young again,
pricey,
Brian. You'd feel
but
vital.
Also, there could be work uses for this, like people working in a warehouse or something, if you've got to get around a warehouse.
Sure. That's true.
So there could be applications like that. It's not going to be probably a mainstream product, but
talk about range anxiety. What if you fall, what do you do then? So it's sort of the convergence of cheap lithium-ion batteries and energy dense and AI, because they say it runs on AI. So it needs
a computer to figure out
what you're doing and when to push.
Yeah, and this is generation 1, like so many of the products that we talk about. This is the first generation. So, I imagine these will only get better.
Okay. Well, it's time for the tweet of the week. And no, I'm not calling it the X of the week. Screw you, Musk. This is something that I've been looking forward to. This is Jenny Chase, works for Bloomberg New Energy Finance as a solar analyst. She's considered by many to be the foremost person on solar as a whole. She's very into the weeds on adoption, and she studies, exports and satellite photos and knows everything about where solar is going. So every October around this time, she does this tweet storm and updates the state of where we are this year. So everyone in this space sort of anxiously awaits this to see what happens. So I'm going to cover it in two different segments this week. I'm going to break it down into two segments. The second segment will be when she starts talking about things that aren't necessarily solar. Okay, so I'm not going to highlight everything she says because it's very long. It's like a 30-tweet thing. But I will touch on some of the things that I'm interested in and I think our listeners will be interested in. Number one, solar is the cheapest source of bulk electricity in many countries and the quickest to deploy. And now you couldn't stop it being built if you wanted to. So it's on its own. It's the economics of it are taking off. You can't stop.
It's a no-brainer.
The limits to PV build in most places are grid access. That is, you have to connect all that power into the grid somewhere. Permitting, which takes time and costs money, and sometimes installation labor. There's a shortage of people who can do that in certain parts of the world. Two, we don't need sorry.
My son is working on a solar farm right now, which I think I may have mentioned.
You did not mention that. That's big news.
Yeah. They have a deadline to get it up and running, so he's working overtime and on weekends. But he says it's very boring. Like he's mostly just zip tying cables.
Yeah.
But it's one of the reasons that solar is so great is that it's just so much easier to deploy than say a nuclear power plant.
If he was building a nuclear power plant, it would be a different story. There would be no zip tying of cables. That's interesting. How come that never came up before? Right here in the Clean Energy Show family, we have somebody working on a solar farm.
Yeah, and he sometimes also works in the oil field too. Like he's an apprentice electrician, so that work is not as boring apparently. But at least he's doing solar as well.
Well, he's saving the planet, so yeah. So we can ask questions then. If I have a question, and I probably will, Brian, maybe he can answer it in the future. So that's very interesting. And that just goes to show there's a lot of work that's going to be coming our way as we transition and transform. Number two from Jenny Chase, we don't need a solar technology breakthrough. Today, solar developers just need a grid connection and permission to sell electricity, and they'll be off building solar plants, whether it's a good idea or not. That is to say, solar is improving in efficiency. There's been breakthroughs, and some of them are real and some of them not so much. But we don't need it because it's cheap and we have it right now. It's not contingent on improvements, is what she's saying. Right now, the price of solar modules hits a new record low every week. Currently, 13.6 cents per watt due to oversupply. There's a big oversupply right now. Some manufacturers will exit in the next 2 years. It's a tough business. This is something I've heard her say in interviews. It's solar manufacturing is tough because there is a technological change. Your factory is then obsolete and, you're out of business. Plus, it's cutthroat. So it has to be very cheap. This is quite normal in this industry, and nobody will learn any lessons from it. It's good for buyers, though. Okay, 4, incremental improvements in solar modules continue. 2023 was the move from PERC module efficiency of 21.3%, being the standard design, to TOPCon, which is 22.3%, which is a 1% improvement. If you think 1% isn't much, think about millions and millions of solar panels giving you 1% extra juice for 30 years, and that's pretty damn significant.
Yep.
TOPCon is the new technology. The average solar module in 2023 was about 21.6% efficient on average, and that is up from 15.4% from a now obsolete multicrystalline design in 2012. In October 2021, when the standard mono module was 27.3 cents US per watt, I said it would come down. It would come back down over 1 to 2 years, referring to all-time low of 19 cents in the summer of 2020. But since, it's now 13.6 US cents in normal markets. Not in the United States, not in India. Those aren't normal markets right now, but not too bad of a call. In number 6, India and the U.S. have solar import tariffs, so modules are pricier there, 23 and 33 cents respectively, and both countries are subsidizing local manufacturing capacity. This is a perfectly good strategy as long as it doesn't slow down their energy transition. Any thoughts so far, Brian?
No, keep at it.
After grid and land issues, the next big challenge for PV will be power price cannibalization. And this is what I mentioned at the top. This is a new concept to me. This is the idea that solar plants in one area all generate at the same time. And this means that they reduce the price of power at that time, cannibalizing their own revenues. So then it becomes less profitable. And this is something I recently heard her say in an interview, and by coincidence, the same week. So 50% of grid equals of grid power in solar is solar cannibalization. That's her threshold for solar cannibalization. Basically, she's saying we could do 100% of the grid, but it's not going to become economically viable for investors once we hit that 50% threshold.
Yeah, and why a mix of solar and wind is probably a good idea, because wind works on a different schedule than solar.
High solar penetration resulting in power price cannibalization also affects other power plants, but not as much as it affects solar, because solar plants generate most at times when solar is pushing the price down the most. This will inhibit further solar build when we get to 50%, according to her. She could change her.
So when it's super sunny, you don't always get the top price, unfortunately.
Yes. This is why we think that there are going to be lots of negative pricings in electricity when renewables dominate all grids. By 2030, most countries will have spot power prices of zero for a few hours every sunny day. This is what we're talking about. This will be passed on to end consumers to encourage them to shift power demand to sunny days or sunny periods by electric vehicle and battery charging and preheating and pre-cooling their house. So you with your heat pump. By the way, how's your heat pump going? It's now winter where we are.
Yeah.
So far,
I
so
don't
good?
know what the electrical bill is going to be yet. I haven't had it long enough to know the effect on power. I know it's going to use a lot of power, but in terms of heating the house, it's working great.
Okay. I do know that heat pumps usually, if you're away all day at work, say, it takes a while longer to heat your house if you program your thermostat. At least that's what I've been told. Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, like it takes longer to heat back up again?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely slow to heat up, but our high efficiency gas furnace was also slow to heat up in the morning. Like, from the furnace that came with the house, the heat was completely instant, but the high efficiency ones, always take longer.
So it may well be that negative power prices are happening for a few hours every sunny day, followed by high evening power prices when the sun goes down. And this is a problem solved by capitalism and batteries. So you can incentivize people with capitalism to save money, charge at certain times, and, buy batteries as too for their home. Utility scale batteries became a thing much faster than I expected, Jenny Chase says. Researchers recorded 16.8 gigawatts of gross energy storage capacity additions worldwide in 2022 and expect 41.9 gigawatts in 2023. That's almost 3 times from this year to last year, or next year to this year.
Grid scale batteries, this is huge. And of course, it just goes in line with everybody, just sort of cranking up production of batteries worldwide.
Yeah. That's quite remarkable because, 42 gigawatts is 42 nuclear reactors for, it looks like 2 hours, 2.5 hours maybe, of storage that typically happens. So small-scale batteries are a thing too, even though the economics don't always make much sense. 2023 battery attachment rates, proportion of residential PV buyers who also get a battery are 70%, more than 70% in Germany and Italy, and more than 50% in Switzerland, and more than 30% in the UK. That's great.
Yeah, that always depends on your local jurisdiction, how well you can kind of make use of a battery and, so forth.
And she says in one of her later tweets, we ought to be building more wind. Seriously, solar will get built anyway, but wind needs some help. And wind blows in the dark and in the winter. This is the solar queen saying that we need some wind to offset that.
Yeah, so I guess the idea being that solar is so cheap that this is going to be the go-to. So maybe more subsidies in the direction of wind.
We really see solar taking off, the builds in various countries, and we'll get to more of that later. So it doesn't help that solar pushes down power prices and generates renewable energy credits, which hurts wind farm economics, which is why maybe it needs that subsidy that you speak of. Bloomberg New Energy's mid-cumulative solar forecast is 5.8 terawatts by 2030. 5.8, that's above the 5.3, their models that we need to be on global net zero by 2050 path. So they have computer models. They say we need 5.3 terawatts of solar by 2030, and we're surpassing that by half a terawatt, which is nothing to sneeze at. And I'll bet you anything. I'll bet my left foot that it'll be better than that by the time we talk about this next year, because that's always changing. So wind is 1.9 terawatt forecast, and 3.6 terawatt net zero pathway is a big miss. So they need a lot more, almost twice as much wind as we're on path to get. So yeah, that's what she's saying. We need to get heavy on the wind.
Yeah, solar's on track, but wind not quite so much.
And we'll have more of Jenny's annual solar update later in the show.
Okay, so I've got several kind of stories here. It's the kind of automobile EV update, and there's just kind of many stories going on. So I thought I would try and include them all in a sort of a big roundup of what's going on in the world of EVs.
But can I summarize something? I feel a chill in the EV adoption right now.
Yeah.
Ford, Chevy has backed off. Tesla's talking about advertising, and they've lowered their prices. What's going on, Brian? I don't imagine you know, but I mean, some of it is people are putting off purchases because of high interest rates and scary economy in the future, perhaps. Confidence is low.
Yeah, we're just at an EV plateau. I mean, it's the demand is still there. People still want electric vehicles. Everybody's mostly still ramping up production. Tesla's still increasing their production. And yes, they're starting to have to advertise. But, they're bumping up against the limits of their kind of more early adopter, strategy. So, yeah, they're starting to advertise because not enough people know about this. And, the other car makers, they're getting on board with Tesla's charging connector, which is a big deal. But that's still a couple of years away. So it kind of feels like a lot of the players, they're just not quite ready to really ramp things up. So we're just at a plateau in the demand, and it's going to be a hump that we have to get through. And yeah, high interest rates, that's definitely part of it. It's definitely more expensive to buy a car.
Losing $30,000 on their trucks. That's why I can't wait for the Tesla Cybertruck reveal. I think that's very important to see what they have to bring to the table.
But here's the thing, though, and GM and Ford both said they're going to scale back because they don't quite see the demand, and of course, I think they're scared because they're losing $30,000 a truck. But in order to get profitable, you have to get at scale. So, slowing down doesn't make sense. The reason they're in the pickle they're in right now is because they moved too slowly. That they should have started on all this stuff 10 years ago, and so. Slowing down the plans again just doesn't really make sense. And Hyundai Kia have said the opposite. They're going to keep expanding. They're going to keep doing whatever they want with EVs. They're going to keep pushing it. Nissan has said that as well. Nissan hasn't been doing great lately, but they've got a big success now in Japan with an electric vehicle, a small electric vehicle. And this story is from Bloomberg. So the top-selling EV in Japan is a car that's a joint venture between Nissan and Mitsubishi. And, we often talk about the Japanese automakers lagging behind. Well, they have a hit on their hands. That's the good news. The bad news is it's EVs only make up 1.5% of new car sales in Japan as of last year.
Pathetic.
So, it's very, very bad. But Nissan, I think they're just in a different position. They've been kind of losing market share. They haven't been doing great lately. So they're ready to go, further with EVs. But yeah, this is this car in Japan. It's a very, very tiny little car. It's called the Sakura, and Mitsubishi has a version. They call it the EKX. They developed it jointly together. It won Japan's Car of the Year award in 2022.
Good.
And now here in the first half of the year, it's roughly accounts for half of the EV sales. And, the main selling point is that it's cheap. It's about a $13,000 EV, and this is proving popular.
Yeah, and some of the news stories on the adoption problem is that people are concerned about infrastructure. Do you think that's valid right now, these days? I mean, you certainly don't have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, for non-Teslas, I think it's still an issue. I did look up what, in Japan in particular, how they're doing with chargers. So the country as a whole, there's about 30,000 chargers, fast chargers for cars. Which doesn't sound too bad, but that's translates to one charge for every 4,000 users, and this is much, much less than other countries in Europe. It's 1 in every 500, 1 in every 600 in Europe. So they're lagging behind on all these things, but someone has to be the leader and someone has to be the follower. There was another interesting development. This is from Electrek. The Japan Mobility Show just happened, and someone's working on a electric car that uses the swappable batteries from Gogoro that we often talk about. They're the small batteries that go in those scooters. So imagine a car using those, and this is a project developed from Foxconn. So this is a big company behind it, and it's another very, very small car like this car that we're just talking about here from Nissan and Mitsubishi. So, not a lot of range, but particularly in rural Japan, this has just proven to be really popular because there's a lot of people that just need to do small commutes, that do small drives. And if you're out in the countryside in Japan, there isn't maybe necessarily the public transit.
I understand there's 4 of them and you put them in the back of the car, kind of in the cargo space. But, they're pretty heavy. Unless you're, Arnold Schwarzenegger, lifting 4 of these suckers in and out, it's not going to be that fun.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it one at a time, so hopefully it's not too bad. But, the idea being also that because there's so many Gogoro battery swap stations that maybe you only need to swap one of them. Maybe you only need to swap 2 of them because, there's a lot of stations.
Well,
everywhere.
that's interesting that Gogoro, they're doing really well with their setup. Maybe I should buy their stock if they're moving into cars now, too. Maybe airplanes will have swappable batteries, really big ones.
Yeah, it's possible. But anyway, getting back to the U.S., I just wanted to do an overall strike update because this really seems to have been the year of strikes, not just in the automotive industry, but of course, the Writers Guild in America had a huge strike. Apparently, the Screen Actors Guild is close to a settlement, perhaps.
Just rumors, Brian. You don't know that, do you? What do you know?
Yeah.
Are you inside the talks?
That's the latest word I'm hearing on the street. UPS had a big strike as well that was settled recently. But of course, it's the automotive companies that I've been kind of the most interested in. So they have reached tentative agreements. So they've the UAW is expanding their strike against General Motors, but Stellantis reached a tentative agreement and so did Ford. So it seems that perhaps we're kind of getting to the end of the automotive strikes. There's about a 25% jump in wages over the next 4.5 years with this contract that Ford and Stellantis are signing. So These are decent increases. Of course, we're living in a high inflation world. So, this is, I guess, why we're in the year of strikes, partly. But in any case, we're kind of moving forward, at least, with some of these strikes. And there's been other announcements. General Motors and Honda, they had an EV partnership that we probably talked about on the show maybe a year ago or something. They decided to end their partnership. So GM and Honda both kind of scaling back their EV plans, which is disappointing. So whatever they thought they were going to do with that partnership is ending. But like I said, Hyundai, Kia, they're going to push forward. Tesla has maybe slowed down a bit, but I suspect that, like they're building that new factory in Mexico, which is
that's
to build
also
their
delayed,
new lower
though.
cost
That's
car.
Cooled down.
Yeah. But again, like what would they gain by actually slowing it down? Like they're going as quickly as they can. I suspect that there's just normal delays, but it is a chance to argue for lower interest rates. It's part of this is just complaining on the part of Tesla and others that they're just trying to get the Fed to lower interest rates. So they're just sort of crying about demand maybe being stalled because of that.
Well, you know what I think? I think that legacy auto, and when I say that, of course, I mean Ford, GM, Toyota, Honda, Volkswagen, they are stumbling. They have put out, great cars in some cases, in most cases, and then, I don't know, they really didn't do what Tesla did. Tesla consolidated and made great efficiencies, but they have this old system with ICE vehicles where they have different manufacturers for different sections of the vehicle. They all have to cooperate with each other, and it's very difficult to lower the price and have efficiencies, and things just aren't, evolving very fast. So I think Ford said something like, we're going to come back with a new platform and a more profitable F-150 that's going to be better. The charge is faster. That's one of the knocks against it, is that, it's a very big battery. It would charge fast if it was my Bolt. It would be fine, but because it's such a big vehicle and a big battery, it's not that very fast charging speed. So I think, they've stumbled, and they're not going to, I think it's a problem for them because who's ready to come? BYD from China and others from China, and they may not necessarily be doing North America at the moment very strong, but they are doing Europe and Australia, I think, and other parts of the world, South America even. So, and they're very threatened by it in Germany, I know. They're, it's Volkswagen culture there, and they're not happy with these lower priced cars coming. And even with all the tariffs, they're still competitive on price from China. And they're not bad cars.
Yeah, it was always going to be an uphill battle for all the legacy automakers because you have to figure out how to wind down your combustion car infrastructure and ramp up. And, it's a nearly impossible thing to do. Like it could be that they're doing it as well as they possibly could. It's just incredibly difficult because your new product line makes your old product line obsolete. And, at a certain point, people aren't going to want to buy the gas cars. But at this particular moment, they're not quite seeing the demand they want for EVs. So they're pulling back on the gas pedal, as it were, no pun intended. But, then they're just prolonging this phase out of their gas cars. It's an incredibly difficult position to be in.
Yeah. I guess, the Ford Mustang Mach-E has some issues that, it's not charging fast and it's not handling as well as the competition. Some of these just aren't competing with Tesla. I think that's one of the issues.
Yeah, and of course, Tesla's got the charging infrastructure. So, maybe they can only sell so many electric vehicles because they just don't have the charging infrastructure. People are only going to be so interested. But of course, within a year or two, they're going to start being able to use the Tesla network here in North America. And that might be the better time for them to kind of ramp up anyway. Like once you've got the charging infrastructure, then you can really put the pedal to the metal. But, oh man, it's tough.
And on Monday, Panasonic says that they are slowing battery production amid weaker EV business. Not Tesla, but for other, we always hear that they can't make them fast enough because there's a battery, bottleneck. Well, that's apparently not the case. So,
well, I mean, I think right now we just have an information bottleneck. We talk about EV myths all the time. People just aren't totally ready for it. And, we're just not at that point where everybody kind of understands the advantages. And especially if they're still a little on the pricey side, if every EV being sold was dirt cheap and it was 10, 20 grand cheaper than a gas car, we wouldn't necessarily have these problems. But, there's still all those myths going around at EVs. So, as we start to build the business and, you got to sell millions more every year, that means there has to be millions more people out there that understand the benefits. And we're just at this kind of dead spot, it would seem, where there's just not quite enough people that quite understand what's
I hope
going
it's
on.
not misinformation from the oil industry, because we've seen how that gets around.
Yeah. We know that there's definitely some of that going around, and we run into that all the time. People think that EVs just can't handle, X situation. That's definitely not true. And yeah, so then finally, Cruise had their license pulled for their driverless cars in California. They were having a dispute with the DMV, and they decided to suspend their operations everywhere and take a step back. There was, of course, an accident in California where someone was hurt.
That wasn't their fault,
this is going to be an inevitable thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, the media wouldn't have it that way. I don't want to be jumping on the media, but, some of these things are valid, but they gravitate to, it was the electric car's fault. It was the autonomous vehicle's fault. The autonomous vehicle was driving beside an ICE vehicle. The ICE vehicle hit the person.
Yeah.
The person flew into the pathway of the autonomous vehicle. And of course, if you're not designed to stop when a flying person is coming at you, you can't do it that fast. And it's blamed on the autonomous vehicle.
But there was also an issue about how the autonomous vehicle stopped, that, it ended up dragging the person longer than it should have.
Something like that, yeah.
I didn't. Yeah. So there was definitely something that the autonomous vehicle could have handled better. And then they seem to have gotten into a bit of an information dispute, a spat with the DMV. The DMV said they didn't hand over all the video that they needed to, and got mad and pulled their license. And, but anyway, in other autonomous news, Waymo is partnering with Uber in Phoenix. So if you happen to be in Phoenix, and if we have any listeners in Phoenix, if you pull up your Uber app, it might give you the option to order an autonomous vehicle now. So that seems like a good way to do it, if to partner with Uber to get these sort of, trial driverless things going. So that's Waymo in Phoenix.
Uber had their own autonomous program. Then they killed somebody, actually with a driver at the wheel, a safety driver who wasn't paying attention. And, we're 85 episodes into this show. And from day one, I've been saying that autonomous vehicles are going to kill someone as part of the growth, and it's going to delay it by a year or two. And, apparently that's sort of happened, even though if the ICE vehicle was a better driver, it never would have happened. But yeah.
Yeah, and there'll be other pauses along the way, no doubt. People understandably quite nervous about robots driving around. But these are hurdles that we will eventually get through.
So once again this week, we've got a dearth of mail, and I'm just going to touch on a few really quickly here. RM Newth says those Alberta Grin Energy ads that we mentioned last week that really got my heart going. He says they're running ad nauseum here in Ottawa in Canada, and I'm looking at the advertising laws of Canada regarding straight up lies, or at least misleading information. There must be something. They're absolute, complete American-style politics. They're just pulling things out of thin air. And yeah, I saw another one on an NFL game that wasn't on an app, that was on broadcast television last night. and it was different. I didn't want to watch it again or even think about it. Another one here says, "Hi, Brian and James. I came across the news story about an electric fire truck brought into service in Gilbert, Arizona. I thought you would be interested. Love the podcast. Keep up the good work." This is a clip.
Gilbert Fire Department is adding to its fleet. Today, the department unveiled the first electric fire truck in Arizona. Officials say the truck will have all of the bells and whistles of a normal truck, but this one will reduce emissions, cut down on fuel, and produce less noise. There are 2 other fire departments in the country that have a similar truck.
And that was from Jeff. And another one here says, "Hi, you mentioned the news about Japan testing out wireless charging at streetlights, and you claimed that wireless charging is less efficient than plug-in charging. That's not necessarily true. Witricity claims that they can do wireless charging as efficient as level 2 plug-in charging. Whenever you charge a car, there's some electricity that's lost to heat and sort of the transition between DC to AC sometimes in the inverter.
Yeah.
They are using magnetic resonance in the wireless transfer, and you don't need the onboard charger in the car. I don't know how that works. I'm not a technician. See more here. This is Wintricity.com. If you get an extra 6 kilometers or miles of range for every minute you charge at a stoplight, you can easily keep your charge level in city driving. I don't know if I agree with that, because you don't want to hit every stoplight, and if you have to be at the front of the line, the stoplight line, in order to get that sweet charge.
Yeah.
I mean, in an ideal world, it would be progressive and you'd keep moving. He also says, Tessa Bjorn from Norway, who, congratulations, Bjorn, he's got a new house today that he's moving into, has also tested wireless charging and was surprised at the efficiency. Thanks for a good show. Not a great show, not a fantastic show, just a good show. I guess better than an okay show and way better than a crappy show. This is from BR, our Sven, the Green Viking. And Mike, the Canadian, says, Energy Talks is a podcast you might want to consider with Markham Hislop. Brian and I occasionally listen to his show. Thanks for the podcast. I'm a regular listener. Dear Brian and James, hello. My name is Otto Gunderson, and I am a renewable energy reporter that has spent 2023 traveling across South America and Africa and writing on renewable development in the global South. I believe is an important part of the transition to clean energy that is underrepresented in the news today, and I would be so grateful to speak on your podcast about my findings. We don't have guests, but thanks, Otto. I get 5 emails a day, Brian, saying, I love your show. You and Brian are fantastic. And I've got a great guest for you. So they obviously haven't listened to the show, because they would know then that we don't have guests. Randy recommended 2 New York Times articles. One feature on the Canadian wildfire season that was called Canada's Year of Fire. And EV Range Anxiety is a case study where the reporter was driving from Minneapolis to North Dakota border community in the summertime. I had read that and was frustrated. It's another one of those stupid articles that should never have been published. This guy was doing a reporter. He rented, had to do a story, so he rented a EV, didn't know how to use it, didn't know how to find a charger, and then he writes a big negative story on EVs on it because he needed to get towed, and the rental company wouldn't pay for his tow, which was quite expensive.
Yeah, and I did that exact drive just a couple of weeks ago, and it went great.
I looked on PlugShare, and there's all kinds of, you're dealing with Tesla, which also there's a lot of Teslas that are open to with the Magic Docks there. But I also did the Better Route Planner to plan it out in my car. No, in his car. The car that I can't remember which car I used, but I used his car and his configuration. And yeah, it was possible to do. You had to take a bit of a detour because there is a bit of a black hole there where he was going. But for the most part, the whole state is covered in level 3 chargers. They just are missing one in that area.
Yeah, and I've heard people talking about Hertz. Hertz, of course, rents quite a few electric vehicles. They have Teslas and Polestars and other cars. And there's a suggestion that maybe they're not doing enough education with their users, because it is, if you've never done it before, it is a learning experience. People are used to being able to just stop at a gas station wherever you want, and it's obviously not that much more difficult to charge. But, there is a slight bit of knowledge that people need.
Yeah. Anyway, that's it. That's all the mail I'm going to touch on this week because we're going long.
Okay, so story here from 9 to 5 Mac. I wanted to bring this up because I mentioned it just in passing a few weeks ago. There was an Apple event, and they have their new Apple Watch that's out. And a big part of the presentation on their keynote was the fact that the new Apple Watch is carbon neutral, that, Apple has been adding more clean energy to their manufacturing and so forth. But anyway, 9 to 5 Mac reports that in Europe, Apple is not allowed to call their watches carbon neutral because they're using some carbon offsets to get to that 100% figure. So this is the European Consumer Organization, BEUC. At the same time, they did acknowledge that Apple has done a good job of cutting their emissions. They've cut 81% of their watch-based emissions compared to the production of the watch in 2015. So Apple making great strides, but this is considered greenwashing in Europe if you're using carbon offsets as part of your, carbon neutral slogan or advertising slogan.
All right. Well, back to the solar report from Jenny Chase from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. She is a solar analyst and one of the foremost ones doing that work. The other day, I think I tweeted something out where they had the where will solar be the cheapest renewable energy source to install in the world? And by 2025, all of Canada, this was colored in the color that said that they're going to be ready, right up to the damn North Pole in Santa Claus's backyard. The whole country, Alaska, the continent as a whole, North America, was completely covered in red, which meant that solar will be the cheapest, which means that there's enough sunlight there. But even in the 2030s, there's some places in Nordic countries, I would say, in Europe, Northern Europe, where they're still going to have a struggle. And I wonder if that's where Jenny Chase was talking about. We're going to need some other sources to help with solar, because I guess maybe the resources aren't great there, but even in Canada, we are completely pretty good for solar. Hydrogen made with a renewable, of course, solar doesn't work in the wintertime up north in the North Pole, but in the summertime it does quite well. Hydrogen made with renewable electricity will be used for steel and fertilizer manufacture. Some may be made into ammonia for shipping and aviation fuel. Let me start that again. Hydrogen made with renewable electricity will be used for steel and fertilizer manufacture. Some may be made into ammonia for shipping and aviation fuel. Some may even be burned for power in weeks of low renewables, which is one way to shift energy from summer to winter. That's their thought on hydrogen. Decarbonizing aviation is hard. The CEO of Lufthansa said in September that running its fleet on sustainable aviation fuel made from electricity would take half of Germany's current electricity demand. That is pretty significant, just for aviation. Bloomberg New Energy Finance, she says, thinks this is an underestimate, that it would actually be worse than that. And again, this is Jenny Chase's thoughts on things kind of not solar, but things that she bumps up against. Heat pumps are better for heating homes than hydrogen, but in seasonal climates like Northern Europe, this will exacerbate the seasonal demand and a supply mismatch for solar. So that's going to be a problem. We need to build wind and probably nuclear as well, she says. Getting that last 10 to 30% of carbon out will be hard and require some expensive solutions. The first 70 to 90% is fairly easy-ish, but we're getting on with it. And, we are. Ordinary people have no idea, she says, how much progress we've made. She says to tell people at parties that in 2022, renewables produced over 47% of Germany's electricity. Pretty darn amazing.
I'm not sure I want to be that guy at a party, but yeah, that's a valid...
I thought you were that guy at a party.
That's a valid statistic.
Nobody wants to hear it, but, if people get arguing, people start poo-pooing, if the renewables come up, they poo-poo it, what she's saying is that blows people's minds, and they don't think it's possible because they've been told otherwise.
Yeah, and Germany wasn't known for its clean grid. Canada is known for its clean grid. Germany was not. But that's the stat. In 2022, renewables produced over 47% of Germany's electricity.
Also, fairly cloudy climate, The 2022 energy crisis should put most concerns about the cost of renewables subsidies to rest. Renewable energy saved Europe billions of euros in imported gas and reduced purchases from Russia. Turns out, fossil fuels also cost money, and sometimes, unexpectedly, a lot.
As I like to remind people, the fuel costs for solar and wind are zero.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
A new Stanford paper finds funding for carbon capture and pipes increase net CO2, air pollution, land damage, even in the easiest of cases. Better to end ethanol refineries and flex fuel vehicles and instead use battery electrics powered by wind, water, and solar. In India, solar power is increasingly meeting peak power demand that is occurring during the daytime hours, according to Ember Climate. Tony Seba writes, we can keep existing hydro, something we talked about last week, but new hydro cannot compete economically with 100% solar, wind, and batteries anywhere in the world that we've looked. For instance, when we did the solar, wind, battery numbers for the Anchorage area in Alaska, we kept the hydro, and this is what we got. So competitive pricing was getting beat. No point in making new hydro because it's more expensive, which is good for people who don't want new hydro, and because it's not carbon-free either. The International Energy Agency's freshly released World Energy Outlook has China's fossil fuel use going into long-term decline in 2024. Brian, we're 2 months away from that.
Yeah, some very encouraging words from the International Energy Agency this week on, the peaks for fossil
That's
fuels.
in their most conservative scenario. So the end of construction as an economic driver in China and its shift to building clean energy instead to drive the economic growth is what is happening. And it's time for a CES Fast Fact. About a third of RVers, that is recreational vehicle owners, the people who take to the highways and nature to live their lives and vacations, a third of them own an electric vehicle. I'm an RVer. I have an electric vehicle. There you go. And half of EV owners plan to tow a travel trailer, according to the RV industry. And this is from Bloomberg. So, yeah, that's a thing. We see travel trailers with their own self-powered EV batteries popping up a lot now.
Yeah, you can put batteries in your trailer because, of course, towing a trailer does affect your range quite a lot. But if there's batteries in the trailer, that can help. And, of course, as we've been saying a lot, this is the first generation for all this stuff. So at some point in the future, towing trailers will not be
And then you
an
get the
issue.
power in your trailer to power the damn trailer if you're off the grid, if you're boondocking, as we say in the Tom Selleck world. The IEA cut its global gas demand outlook again due to the expansion of renewables. IEA now sees gas demand peaking in all scenarios by 2030. And this freaked out the Premier of Alberta, who called them a political crazy organization now. The IEA was formulated during the first energy crisis to manage the crisis in the 70s, but now they're managing the transformation of renewables. So in contrast, fuel producers like Shell expect gas demand to rise and play a key role in the energy transition. The IEA says no. I hope they're right. From our comrades at the China National Energy Administration, China's 9-month surge in new wind and solar generation eclipses the combined output of its 26 nuclear reactors that are under construction. That is to say, they're building the most nuclear reactors in the world by far, 26. Huge project, takes years and years and billions of dollars. And 9 months, they built more wind and solar. This is our point that we talk about all the time. We're in a race here to save the damn planet. We got to get the carbon out as fast as possible and do what's available and what's easy and what's cheapest. And yeah, they did more in 9 months with wind and solar than all of it. And I know one of those things costs more than the other. So if Bloomberg NEF's expectation for solar additions in 2023 come true, solar alone this year will produce more than all the nuclear plants. Wow. Another CES fast fact. It takes about 300 acres of farmland, Brian, to run a petrol car on corn ethanol. 300 acres to run one car. Visit an electric car running on batteries takes about 1 acre of photovoltaic solar panels. So 300
Amazing.
times the land to make corn ethanol. Maine residents are set to vote in November on whether the state should replace 2 investor-owned utilities with a new nonprofit power company, with wide-reaching implications for consumer electricity bills and Maine's climate fight. A study led by Stanford University, and aren't they all, it seems, School of Medicine now, says you can lower your personal food emissions by making some simple choices. Substituting chicken patty for ground beef means your burger will have about 8 to 10 times lower carbon footprint. That's just switching from beef burger to chicken burger. Ground beef patty has 20 times higher carbon footprint than one that's plant-based. Choosing chicken instead of beef for a meal results in an average reduction in greenhouse gas emissions roughly equal to driving 9 miles. I got to do that. Clean Technica, one high-speed train. The first high-speed train arrives in the southern hemisphere. This is in Indonesia, between its 2 largest cities, both on the island of Java, the nation's most populous island. The national capital and largest city, Jakarta, has 11.25 million residents, and the 4th largest city, Bandung, has 2.6 million, and the train is connecting. It's not terribly long, but they're going to expand it, I think, up to 800 kilometers eventually. But this train is capable of running at 420 kilometers per hour or 261 miles per hour. On this particular line, the trains have already tested up to 385. I've seen video. It's pretty surreal to see a train go that fast. It feels like you're flying. From the International Energy Agency again, China's total demand is on track to peak around the middle of this decade. I found that interesting because you know how we're always talking about China's demand is insatiable. It's growing so fast. It's interesting to know that this demand is actually going to peak at the middle of this decade, so they can stop building dozens of nuclear plants and coal plants even to try and keep up with that. So that's interesting. It's going to push fossil fuels into decline further. Another CES fast fact from the IEA, once again, a terrorist organization, according to the Premier of Alberta. 5 years ago, for $1 invested in fossil fuels, the same went to clean energy. But today, for $1 invested in fossil fuels, $1.80 is going to clean energy. So, yeah, why isn't that the one we're talking about? Why isn't clean energy the king? But fossil fuels, the oil industry is like wine, 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 wine. Always us, we're the leaders. Well, screw you, you're small potatoes compared to clean energy.
And of course, there are governments like Alberta, they rely on fossil fuel revenue. The economy is definitely tied to fossil fuels, but I don't know why they don't go hard at both. Like, they can keep going hard at fossil fuels because they love them so much and because, there is a demand for it. But why not go hard at renewables at the same time and be the kings of all energy? That's what they should be doing.
No, because fossil fuels has made them rich. Fossil fuels has made the province not have any sales tax, and they feel better than everyone else. It has a big psychological factor. Markham Hislop had a very interesting show about a year ago on that topic, and I mentioned it here on the program. And finally this week, Professor Katharine Hayhoe, in light of the climate-denying, fossil fuel-funded new Speaker of the House in the United States Congress, she writes on Twitter, "Science doesn't care if we believe in it or not. You can say, I don't believe in gravity, but if you step off a cliff, you're going to go down. Climate is changing. Humans are responsible. The impacts are serious, and there are solutions if we act now."
And that is our show for this week. Please take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And around social media, we are Clean Energy Pod.
And we'll be in touch with some of our more email in the coming episodes. And we'll touch on some of our email and we'll touch on some more of our email. Fuck it. And we'll touch on some more of your email And we'll touch on some more of your email in upcoming episodes, I hope. CleanEnergyShow@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app or Apple iTunes, because you know what? It helps the show. And you should help us. Donate to the show via the links in your show notes if you care to. We would appreciate that. And if you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app, because that way you get new episodes delivered every week. And why would you want that, Brian? We'll see you next time.
It sounds great. This was definitely the loudest episode for construction. I tried to mute my microphone whenever I could, but there's so much banging going on. Anyway,
You're driving
we'll
the
see you next
economy,
week.
and that's important. Bye.